A poor single dad came begging for milk for his baby, unaware the woman who fed the child herself was a millionaire. The kitchen was bathed in a cold, flickering light from the overhead bulb, barely holding on. Daniel stood at the sink, one hand steadying himself on the counter, the other clumsily mixing powdered formula into warm water. His hands trembled, not from the chill, but from the exhaustion that sat heavy on his chest like wet cement. The faucet was still running, water spilling over the sides of the measuring cup. He did not notice. His eyes, rimmed red from sleepless nights, were fixed on the tiny baby seat on the floor. Inside it, 5-week-old Noah was wailing, his face flushed deep pink, tiny fists thrashing in the air, his legs kicking as if the world had betrayed him. Daniel bent down, holding the bottle out with desperate hands. "Come on, buddy, please, just a little," he whispered, voice cracking. "Please, Noah. Daddy needs you to eat." Noah turned his head, mouth clenched shut, then let out a scream so sharp it pierced through Daniel like glass. He knocked the bottle from his father's hand. It hit the tile with a dull clatter and rolled under the cabinet. Daniel sat back on the cold kitchen floor, hands limp at his sides. His breathing was shallow. He looked at the ceiling as if praying to a God he had not spoken to in years. "Please, God, I do not know what else to do," he said hoarsely. "I cannot lose him too." His wife, Mary, had died from a rare complication just days after giving birth. One minute they were planning their future, and the next he was holding her lifeless hand in a sterile hospital room. The grief had not settled. It clung to every breath, every movement, and now this, Noah, born premature, tiny and fragile, refusing to eat formula. He had tried everything, different brands, different temperatures, pacing, rocking, singing lullabies at 3 in the morning. But Noah wanted one thing, what he could no longer have: his mother. Daniel leaned over, gently picked Noah up and held him to his chest, whispering soft nothings, rocking slowly. But the baby kept crying, the sound jagged and unrelenting. That night, when Noah finally whimpered himself to sleep, Daniel sat in the dim light of the living room with his phone. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Shame burned beneath his skin, but desperation won out. He opened the local parenting group he had joined on a whim. Most posts were harmless: playdates, questions about teething, hand-me-down offers. His heart pounded as he began to type. "My name is Daniel. I'm a single father. My wife died after childbirth. My son Noah was born premature. He won't take formula. I've tried everything. Please, does anyone have breast milk to share? I'm willing to drive, to pay, anything. Please inbox me if you can help." He hit post. The minutes stretched. Every second was agony. He refreshed the page twice, then again. No replies. Then his screen lit up. A private message from Claire E. No profile picture, no bio, no posts. He opened it. "I saw your message. I have breast milk, safe, stored, and recent. I lost my child recently. I have more than I need, no payment necessary, just trust me. If you are willing, I can help." Daniel blinked at the message. His pulse quickened. He clicked the profile again. No posts, no photos. The name was all he had. He typed back, hesitating only a moment. "Thank you. Can we talk more? I just need to make sure it's safe." The reply came instantly. "Of course. I understand. Ask me anything." He stared at the screen, something strange unfolding in his chest. There was something in her tone, not just kindness, but familiarity, like someone else who had stared into the same kind of loss. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the windows. Inside, Daniel cradled Noah against his chest, eyes locked on the name. Claire E. He whispered into the dark as the baby whimpered in his sleep. Maybe this is something. The road leading into the woods was narrow and winding, blanketed in a fresh dusting of snow. Daniel drove slowly, the headlights casting long shadows across tall trees wrapped in winter's hush. His hands were tight on the steering wheel. In the back seat, Noah whimpered softly, bundled in layers but still unsettled, the little sounds breaking the stillness like cracks in glass. The address Claire had sent led him to the outskirts of town, where homes sat far apart and the silence had weight. When he pulled up to the gate, his breath caught. The house was large, an old manor, ivy curling up its stone facade, windows glowing faintly with warm light. He parked by the path and hesitated. The wind bit through his jacket as he stepped out, cradling Noah close. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last. This is crazy, he thought. What if this is some kind of trap? The fear tightened in his chest. But then Noah stirred, let out a weak cry, and instinct took over. Daniel raised his hand and knocked. The door creaked open almost immediately. Light spilled out across the snow-covered porch, and there she stood. Claire. Her long blonde hair fell loosely around her shoulders, the ends brushing against the soft folds of her white knit sweater. She looked impossibly delicate, her face pale, cheeks hollowed by grief that hadn't faded. But it was her eyes, deep, oceanic, rimmed with the kind of fatigue only lost could bring, that rooted Daniel in place. In her arms she held a doll, a baby doll, worn, with soft plastic skin and a knitted cap. Daniel froze. "I'm Daniel," he managed, his voice barely above the wind. I'm here because of the message." Claire looked at him for a long moment, not with surprise, but with something quieter, understanding. Then, with a nod, she stepped aside. "Come in, please." He entered cautiously, the warmth of the house enveloping them. Inside, it was calm. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting soft light across the living room. The walls were lined with books. Framed photographs sat on the mantel. Most of them were landscapes, but one stood alone, a photo of a baby boy in a hospital beanie. Claire gently set the doll on a chair beside the fireplace, then turned back to Daniel. "May I hold him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel hesitated, only for a second, then handed Noah over, his arms trembling. Claire cradled the infant with instinctual grace. She sat down in a rocker near the fire, adjusted her sweater, and positioned Noah at her chest. Daniel stood frozen. Noah paused, sniffled, then rooted. A moment later, the impossible happened. He latched. And the crying, days of sharp, relentless, helpless crying, ceased. The only sound left was the gentle hum of the fire and the soft gulping of a baby finally fed. Daniel's throat tightened. Claire did not speak. Her hand stroked the back of Noah's head, her eyes half closed, as if some aching part of her had finally, if only for this moment, found peace. Daniel began, but his voice broke. He cleared it and tried again. Hasn't eaten like that since the hospital. He wouldn't take anything. I thought I was losing him." Claire looked up, and in her eyes there were tears. But no breakdown, only depth. Daniel didn't move. He could only watch. She looked back at Noah. "But when I saw your message, something inside me, something broken, felt drawn. Like maybe I could still give what I had left." Noah finished feeding and dozed off against her chest, his body relaxing fully for the first time in days. Claire rocked gently. Daniel stepped closer. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to," she said softly, not looking away from the baby. "Just let me help." And in that quiet house, surrounded by silence and snow, a mother without a child held a child without a mother. And for a brief, beautiful moment, neither of them was alone. Claire placed Noah in a small bassinet near the fireplace, something too pristine to have been gathering dust. She moved with a quiet grace, as if afraid any sudden noise would wake more than just the baby. When she turned back to Daniel, her expression was soft but unreadable. "Would you like some tea?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. He had not planned to stay, but after everything, leaving now felt wrong. He nodded. In the kitchen, the clink of porcelain and the whistle of a kettle filled the silence. Claire poured chamomile into 2 mismatched mugs and handed one to him. They sat at the long wooden table, its surface scratched and worn but clean, as though someone had lovingly preserved its history. The warmth of the tea seeped into Daniel's hands, chasing out the cold that had settled into his bones since the night his world fell apart. "My wife was a nurse," he began, voice low. "Strong, fierce, actually. She used to say being in labor wasn't even the hardest part of her shift." He gave a weak laugh. She didn't make it. Hemorrhaging after Noah was born. They tried everything. Claire's fingers tightened slightly around her mug. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. Daniel stared into the steam curling from his cup. "I quit my job after that. I was a paramedic. Could not be around ambulances anymore. Couldn't step into another hospital room. Now it is just me and Noah, figuring things out day by day, sometimes hour by hour." She nodded, not speaking for a moment. "My son," Claire said at last, her voice barely above a whisper, "was named Elliot. He died 2 months ago. SIDS. One moment he was warm in my arms, the next, I couldn't wake him." Daniel looked up sharply. The pain in her eyes was too real to question. "I still hear him crying," she continued, "not just in dreams, in the sound of running water, in the wind. It is like part of my body refuses to believe he is gone. I never stopped lactating. I never could bring myself to stop. Like maybe if I kept going, he would still need me." Daniel's chest ached with something wordless. "Sometimes I would pump just to pretend," Claire admitted. "I donated what I could, but part of me kept hoping there would be someone someday who might need it, who might let me give it, not just store it away in a freezer." She looked up at him then, eyes glassy but firm. Daniel swallowed. "I do not know how to say this, but I need to ask." His hand curled around his mug. "Are you using my son to replace yours?" Claire went completely still. For a heartbeat, Daniel regretted the question, but it had been gnawing at him since she first took Noah in her arms. The way she held him, the tenderness, the aching familiarity. Then Claire exhaled a trembling breath. Tears spilled over her lashes. "No," she whispered. "No, I am not replacing him. I know Noah is not Elliot. I do not want him to be. I just—" She covered her face with one hand. "I need a reason to keep breathing. Something. Someone. To pour the love into that I do not know where else to put." Her voice cracked. "It hurts, Daniel. To have all this care, all this milk, all this instinct, and nowhere for it to go." Daniel sat in silence. The kettle on the stove ticked as it cooled. Then, slowly, he reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Not out of pity, but recognition. "I know what it is to lose everything in a day," he said quietly. "But maybe we do not have to go through it completely alone." Claire looked up at him, startled. "I do not know what this is," he continued, "but Noah needed you tonight, and I think, maybe, you needed him too." And in that fragile, flickering kitchen, they sat together, two people shattered by grief, holding the warm shape of possibility between them. The next morning, Daniel hesitated outside Claire's ivy-covered door. Snow blanketed the stone steps, untouched. Noah was bundled in a blue fleece onesie, nestled against Daniel's chest in a sling. The baby's breathing was soft, but the moment the morning air touched his cheeks, he whimpered. Claire opened the door before he knocked. "You came back," she said, voice quiet but warm. Daniel nodded, shifting his weight. "He only slept after yesterday. I didn't know where else to go." "You did the right thing," she replied, stepping aside. "Come in, it's warmer today." Inside, the fire crackled gently. Claire wore a thick gray cardigan over a pale blouse. Her blonde hair was tied loosely, and though her face still held sadness, her eyes lit up when she saw Noah. She reached out, and Daniel gently handed the baby to her. Without hesitation, Claire sat in the rocker by the hearth and unbuttoned her top. Noah latched almost immediately, sighing with relief as his tiny fingers curled into the wool of her sweater. Claire's eyes shimmered as she looked down at him. Daniel stood nearby, awkward at first. But when Noah closed his eyes, lulled by the soft rhythm of Claire's heartbeat, Something in the room softened. "I'll just fix the squeaky window," Daniel muttered, walking to the kitchen. Claire smiled faintly but said nothing. And so began the mornings that returned. Each day, Daniel brought Noah just before sunrise. Claire would be waiting, hair damp from an early shower, with a clean blanket by the fire. As Noah fed and then drifted to sleep in her arms, Claire would read softly from a worn book of poems or hum lullabies, some sad, some sweet. Daniel, never idle, found small things to fix: a creaky cabinet hinge, a leaking faucet, the garden gate that never closed properly. He worked quietly, often pausing to glance at the sight of Noah nestled on Claire's chest, his tiny hand resting against her heart. Claire never asked for help, and Daniel never asked for thanks. But every morning she noticed something: a fresh packet of her favorite jasmine green tea placed on the kitchen counter. She never saw him do it. He never mentioned it, but it was always there, neatly set beside the kettle, as if it had always belonged. On the 7th morning the kettle whistled just as Claire finished burping Noah. She rose, placed him gently in the bassinet near the hearth, and walked into the kitchen. "You're spoiling me," she said, holding up the new tea bag. Daniel looked up from repairing a loose table leg. "Hardly," he replied. "You're feeding my kid. It's the least I can do." Claire smiled, but her voice was soft. "You don't have to fix things to earn your place here." Daniel paused. "I know. But fixing things is easier than fixing what's in here," he said, tapping his chest. That night, just as Claire was settling into bed, a nightmare returned, louder, sharper than before. In it, her baby cried, and no one came. She woke with a scream on her lips and tears soaking her pillow. The house was silent, but she felt the walls closing in. Then the door creaked. Daniel stood there, cradling Noah against his shoulder. The baby stirred and whimpered. Claire sat up, shaking. I didn't mean to wake anyone." Daniel stepped inside without a word. He walked to the foot of her bed, crouched, and reached for her hand. His palm was warm and steady. "I heard," he said gently. "You're not alone tonight." Claire tried to speak, but her voice broke. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her forehead on Daniel's shoulder as he sat beside her. "I keep hearing him cry," she whispered, "even when I'm awake." Daniel did not tell her it would pass. He did not say she needed help. He only tightened his grip on her hand. "You gave Noah peace," he said. "Let us give some back to you," Noah cooed softly in Daniel's arms, as if echoing the sentiment. Claire closed her eyes and, for the first time in weeks, let herself lean into another person's presence without guilt or fear. Daniel sat there with her until sleep reclaimed her, and the only sound left in the house was the soft breathing of two souls beginning to mend. The morning sun barely crept over the treetops when the knock came at the door. Claire, holding Noah against her chest, rocked him gently in her arms. She was humming softly, unaware that beyond the ivy-covered gates of her quiet home, the world had begun to intrude. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. Claire froze. Daniel, in the kitchen finishing up breakfast, moved quickly to the front door. When he opened it, he was met with the blinding flash of a camera and the clamoring voices of 3 reporters. "Mr. Weller, is it true you're letting a grieving woman breastfeed your child? Did she steal the baby? Are you aware of the posts going viral about Ms. Easton's mental health?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "That's enough," he said firmly, stepping forward. But they pushed on. "We have photos taken by neighbors of her nursing the baby by the fireplace. The internet is calling her the millionaire with a ghost child. Care to comment?" Claire appeared behind him, clutching Noah tighter, her face pale. Daniel turned. "Go back inside," he said gently. "No," Claire replied, voice trembling but clear. "Let them ask what they came for." More questions poured out, sharp and full of insinuations, about her mental health, about Daniel's judgment as a father, about the blurred lines of grief and motherhood. Claire did not answer them. She looked down at Noah, who stirred softly, his tiny mouth parting in a sleepy sigh. That image, the fragile child against her chest, the glow of sunlight catching her golden hair, was captured by another camera. By noon it was everywhere. Wealthy recluse raises stranger's child. Claire Easton loses grip on reality. Single father lets grieving millionaire nurse his son. It did not take long for the firestorm to rage online. People debated in comment sections. Talk shows dissected every detail. Some defended her, others mocked or condemned. Headlines screamed in all caps, while speculation bloomed like poison. Claire did not go outside that day. She sat in the nursery with Noah, sleeping peacefully in her lap, scrolling through the storm of opinions, her face calm but her eyes hollow. Daniel returned that evening with groceries. He dropped the bags on the counter and found her exactly where he had left her. "They don't know you," he said softly. Claire didn't look up. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm delusional. Maybe I've blurred everything too much. Daniel stepped closer. "You're not." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "They say I'm pretending Noah is mine, that I've lost my grip." Daniel dropped to one knee in front of her. "Look at me." She did. He placed a hand gently over hers, covering Noah's tiny foot as it peeked from the blanket. "I've lost someone too," Daniel said. "And I know what madness feels like. But what you did wasn't madness. It was mercy. You stepped in when no one else could, and because of you, my son is alive and thriving." She blinked, tears forming. "Claire," he said, his voice steady now, louder, as if addressing more than just her, "you didn't replace your son with mine. You honored your son by helping someone else survive." That night, a new video surfaced. Daniel stood on the porch of Claire's home, Noah cradled in his arms. Claire stood beside him, face bare, hair tied back, silent but proud. The reporters were back. So were the cameras. "I want to say something," Daniel announced. They went quiet. "My wife died giving birth to this little boy. I've done everything I can to keep him alive, but nothing worked until I met Claire." He looked down at Noah, then at the crowd. "Everyone is so quick to assume, to judge, but if any of you have ever lost someone you love, if you've ever woken up wishing for one more moment, you'll understand." He turned to Claire, then reached out his free hand and wrapped it around her shoulders. "She's not crazy. She's the only person who saved my child when the world said there was nothing left to try." Cameras clicked. "She's not pretending. She's not lost. She's the only mother my son has ever known." Then, in front of the world, Daniel did something unexpected. He pulled Claire close and embraced her, not out of obligation, not for drama, but with a deep reverence. Her eyes closed, and for the first time since the headlines broke, she let herself breathe. The image spread, faster than the rumors before it. A man and woman, broken but brave, holding a child between them. Not perfection, not pretense. Just three souls, clinging to love in its rawest, most human form. The frost was beginning to thaw by the time Claire turned on her computer again. She had not touched the keyboard in months. Her last manuscript had been left unfinished, abandoned after her son's passing. But now, as the sun streamed through the tall windows and the house smelled faintly of oatmeal and chamomile, she felt something stirring. Not urgency, not inspiration exactly, just the desire to speak again. She clicked open a blank document, typed slowly. The blog was called "Kindness Fed Us," a phrase Daniel had once whispered late one night as they sat on the porch, Noah sleeping between them. Claire began sharing short reflections about the quiet miracle of holding a baby again, the fear that came with healing, and the strange, stubborn joy that returned in small moments. Noah's tiny hand grasping her shirt, Daniel's quiet chuckle at breakfast, the smell of warm laundry folded beside her writing desk. The blog caught attention, first from readers who knew her as the reclusive author, then from mothers, fathers, people who had lost someone and lived to tell about it. Claire did not talk about wealth or fame. She wrote about human things, about grief, milk-stained blankets, sleepless nights, and the way love could show up in unexpected forms. And each time someone left a comment like, "This made me cry," or "I needed this today," She felt the ache in her chest soften just a little more. Daniel, for his part, had returned to work part-time. On his off days, he came to Claire's home early, carrying Noah in his arms and a grocery bag in the other. They had settled into a rhythm now. Mornings spent walking Noah around the neighborhood trails, afternoons baking together. Claire had taken to making banana muffins that Noah loved. Evenings curled up on the couch as Claire read aloud drafts of her writing while Daniel washed bottles nearby. One Sunday morning, as the trees outside shimmered in pale green buds and the air tasted faintly of spring, Claire closed her laptop and stared at the page in front of her. She had finished chapter 1. It was not perfect, but it was hers, and it was whole. Daniel entered the room quietly, Noah tucked on his shoulder, already drifting back to sleep after a bottle. Claire turned to him, heart suddenly racing with quiet pride. "I finished it," she said. Daniel blinked. "The chapter?" She nodded. He walked over, leaned slightly to glance at the screen. "What's it called?" "The First Cry," Claire replied. "About the night you knocked on my door." He smiled softly. "Fitting." Claire hesitated. "I wrote a dedication, too." He looked at her. "May I?" She turned the screen gently so he could see. At the top, in clean, centered text, were the words, "For Noah, the child who saved 2 lost hearts." Daniel's breath caught. He looked down at his son, then back at Claire. "I mean it," she said quietly. "He saved me, and I think, maybe both of us." Daniel sat beside her, Noah now nestled between them. Claire's hand found the child's back, gently patting it in rhythm. Daniel's hand covered hers. There was nothing romantic spoken, no promises whispered, just a shared understanding, building stronger every day, that their lives had been broken open, and then, by something impossibly fragile and kind, stitched back together. Claire leaned back, smiling gently. "I don't know what this story is yet, but I want to keep writing it." Daniel glanced sideways. "The book?" She shook her head slightly. Outside, the wind rustled softly through the new leaves. Inside, Noah let out a small sigh and nestled deeper into the arms that now belonged to 2 people, each of whom had once believed they would never hold a future again. The air was thick with the sweetness of blooming lilacs. As Noah stood at the edge of the grass, his tiny legs trembling, fists clenched at his sides. Claire knelt nearby, arms open, her heart thudding louder than she expected. Daniel stood behind the toddler, hands out but not touching, letting Noah find his own rhythm. 1 foot, a wobble, another foot, then a sudden lean forward, and Claire surged just in time to catch him in her arms. Noah let out a squeal of delight. Daniel laughed behind them, clapping softly. Claire's eyes filled with tears before she even realized it. She kissed Noah's curls and whispered, "You did it." Daniel walked over, crouched beside them, his voice soft. "Every step he takes is a piece of us healing." Claire nodded, pressing her cheek against Noah's. "It is more than just walking. It is moving forward." Later that evening, after Noah was bathed and asleep in the crib tucked beside Claire's bed, she wandered into the room that had remained untouched for nearly a year, her son's room. The walls still held soft murals of clouds and stars. The crib stood neatly made, though it had not known the warmth of a child for months. The scent of lavender lingered faintly. She moved slowly, fingertips brushing against the bookshelf, then the dresser. Her hand paused on the top drawer. Inside, tucked in tissue paper, was a small gift box she had never opened. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, and carefully lifted the lid. Inside lay a tiny, embroidered baby bib, white cotton, soft as a whisper. A tag read, "For the first messy giggles." Claire pressed the fabric to her lips. It had been meant for a child she never got to feed. A gift that had waited silently through her grief, and now, maybe, it had found its purpose. The next morning, Daniel arrived carrying Noah in a blanket sling, his cheeks rosy from sleep. Claire met them at the door, the box in hand. "I found something," she said. Daniel stepped in, curious. Claire opened the box and offered it gently. Daniel looked down and saw the bib. "It was for him?" he asked quietly. Claire nodded. "It never got used, but I think it should now." She pressed the fabric into his hands. Daniel's throat worked around the words. "Are you sure?" Claire's voice wavered, but her eyes were calm. "Love is not limited by blood or time. I think my son would want it this way." Daniel nodded, clutching the bib. "Then I will treasure it, like I do you." Noah, as if understanding, reached a chubby hand out and gurgled. Claire smiled through her tears. "We are building something. Not replacing, just continuing." They dressed Noah in the little bib that afternoon, and he wore it proudly as he toddled around the kitchen, leaving trails of cookie crumbs and laughter behind. And for the first time, in the house once echoing with absence, the sound of small, growing steps filled every corner. The bookstore smelled faintly of paper and possibility. A year had passed since the darkest winter of their lives, and now Claire and Daniel sat side by side at a long wooden table under soft yellow lights. Stacks of their newly released book, Kindness Fed Us, towered in neat piles beside them. The cover featured a watercolor sketch of a man, a woman, and a small child holding hands under a shared umbrella. Noah sat between them in a small chair, legs swinging back and forth, crayons scattered around his open picture book. He was the picture of 3-year-old mischief, but today he wore a shirt that said, "Written with love." The crowd had been steady since the doors opened. Young couples, single parents, grandparents, even nurses and grief counselors who had followed their story online. People came for the book, but many stayed for the people behind it. Claire signed a copy with her elegant scrawl, then passed it to a young mother who whispered, "Your story saved me, thank you." Daniel was speaking softly to an older man who had lost his wife years ago. "Grief changes you," Daniel said, "but kindness, that brings you back." At the heart of the book was a story of loss and love found in the most unexpected way. Chapter by chapter, Claire and Daniel had recounted the year they met, the night of endless crying, the message from a stranger, the shared silence in a kitchen, the hard mornings and healing evenings. Each chapter closed with a quiet reflection, and the final one ended with the words, "Not all who give birth are mothers. Not all who lose a spouse must lose hope. Family does not need to be perfect. It only needs to be real." As the line of readers dwindled, a young reporter from a local paper approached, recorder in hand. Her voice was curious but kind. "You've told such a personal story. Can I ask something simple but maybe important?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Ask anything." She gestured toward the three of them, then asked, "What are you to each other now?" Claire looked at Daniel. He looked back. Noah reached out without thinking and grabbed both their hands. Claire squeezed his little fingers, smiled, and turned back to the reporter. "We are a family," she said gently, "built from kindness, and a child who never said no to love." The reporter blinked, her eyes softening. "That's beautiful." Claire leaned down and kissed Noah's hair. Daniel placed his free hand over hers. They had never needed labels, not husband or wife, not replacement mother or borrowed child. What they had was stronger than titles. It was presence, effort, choice. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow. Claire watched it land against the bookstore window, remembering the first time she'd opened her door to a man holding a crying baby and nothing else. That had been a different world. But today they had warmth, peace, purpose, and most of all, they had each other. As the final books were signed and Noah grew sleepy, Claire packed her pens while Daniel lifted their son into his arms. They stepped outside into the snow, hand in hand, heart with heart. A family not born, but chosen. And in every step, every shared breath, they rewrote what love could look like. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of kindness, or made you believe again in second chances, please consider subscribing to Soul Stirring Stories. We share real-life inspired tales of resilience, love, and the quiet beauty of human connection. Every view, every comment, and every subscriber helps us continue bringing these moments to life. So if you believe, like we do, that even the smallest act of compassion can change a life, click that subscribe button and join our growing family. Because here at Soul Stirring Stories, we do more than tell stories. We remind the world that hope is never lost.